I'm Lindsay Davis, creator of the program, The Intentional Journey, and coach and mentor for women looking to create a life or career of purpose, resilience, and joy. With me today is the Lisa DeYoung, aka the Mountain Mermaid. Lisa is a creative, independent spirit living in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. She lives by the motto, create, play, thrive. When she's not out exploring the trails, she can often be seen pedaling around town with her colorful bag of journaling supplies. Embracing her creative life is an ongoing adventure, a journey that she loves and trusts more each year and hopes to inspire others to do the same. Welcome, Lisa.
Lindsay, thank you so much. That was
Yes, you're
beautiful.
welcome. Thanks for being here today. So appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a beautiful day in the Rocky Mountains.
It is. Yes, yes. So I have to say, when we met, I guess, geez, maybe like a month or so ago, a couple of
hmm
months ago, I was really struck by your zest for life and just like this effervescent joy. And I feel like that's so embodied in your moniker, the Mountain Mermaid. Yeah. So I just have to ask, where did that originate from?
That's so funny. So it just is one of those things that sort of came to me one day when I was out on the trails. I mean, I love mermaid, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm the mountain mermaid.
Mm.
And it just was something that I was like, wow, I should, that would really be fun to kind of use as kind of my archetype, and to blog around that, to start a blog around that. And so I really just kind of started doing that little by little and just kind of trying to embody it. I couldn't just go out and say, hey, to everybody, but it was just something that came to me literally
Mhm.
one day when I was on the trails by myself. And I just loved it so much that I
Mhm.
decided to see how I could embody it. And I can't remember even what year that was, but it's probably been about 8 or 9 years. And so, little by little I have, and it is kind of funny because now some people know me more as the Mountain Mermaid than anything else. And here I have to share my little pin, which actually I think
Yeah.
my husband gave me this um, many years ago, like before I was the Mountain Mermaid. But um, I just think everyone loves a mermaid. I mean, it's kind of like a princess. And I feel like everyone can be their own, embody mermaid as an archetype if they feel like it
Mhm.
fits them.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and for me, I see mermaids as kind of journeying through the seas. And I always feel like I'm exploring on the trails. And so many of the trails are old. I mean, really, they're all, old seabeds or riverbeds. And so I feel like I'm always kind of exploring in the trails in the mountains, and all around in the mountains. And so that's kind of how it started.
I love this. Yeah. And I love actually that you created, well, I love a couple things. I love that it just popped up for you when you're out enjoying life. Like I find that's where like the best inspiration happens is when we're in a good place, and sort of a quiet mind. And I also love about it that you created this archetype for you to almost like embrace and live into.
hmm
Um, and I find, of course, humans, we really, I think our mind really wraps around archetypes rather than you should be this way, or, try to be a little bit more joyful, or whatever. But when you can create an archetype and then a context for your story, like you seeing yourself as an explorer of these like ancient seabeds and trails and sort of the mountains as your ocean, I feel like that's given you like a really great framework to create a life that you love. um,
hmm
Seems right along lines with your motto too: create, play, thrive. um,
hmm
yeah.
And I feel like those are all kind of intertwined, really, because I mean, when you're out exploring, you really are creating. You're creating
Mm.
your life. And then creating can be about, making things or playing with color, or even out in nature, just creating little ephemeral pieces from rocks and leaves and things like
Mm.
that, that will, you get to have fun creating and seeing, and then they're going to disappear into the wind.
Yeah.
And then playing is also, I mean, I'm playing when I'm outside on the trails, and I'm playing when I'm creating. And, all of that is about thrive. And thriving is also about,
Mm.
being present and taking care of myself, as far as eating well. And, when I'm outside, I'm getting
Mm.
exercise, taking care of my body in that way. So they kind
Mhm.
of all
Mhm.
wrap around one another, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems like it really functions for you as a mantra of sorts, reminding you of like what you're about and putting you in a good space. Which,
Yes, or when I'm not in a good space, reminding me of where I want to be. And
yeah, exactly, exactly.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this reminds me a lot. You tend to get, these little phrases, and usually it comes to me, playing or from meditation, and it sort of becomes very similar, like a reminder of what my good place is for that day or that good space. So I love yours here. It really seems to embody like the you that I see as well, and what
Thanks. And
you've
you know what,
created.
Lindsay, I just want to say I really appreciate your perspective, and the way you've reflected that back to me, not only right now in this
Mm.
conversation, but just in our conversations since we've met.
Mm.
Really, it really helps me to go, oh yeah, like really, it's helping me to understand how I am embracing, embodying it,
Mm.
and also how I can do that. I guess, do that better sometimes when I get off track, which definitely
Mhm.
does happen sometimes.
Even
So
for mermaids. Yeah.
so I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. Yeah. So you have this adventures musings journal. And I know from our previous conversations, it sort of started off as a personal practice for you. And now it's, an official journal and publication, but I'd be curious to hear about maybe like the roots of that. Like how did this begin?
Um, yeah, thanks for asking that. So it began, yeah, as a personal practice that I actually started, gosh, I don't even know how many years ago, when I used to just buy day planners that had, the
Mm.
calendars in them. And I did it to write down, at the time, I think it was like my workouts, but it was also about like, oh, I went on this bike ride, or I went, to this place, and I wanted to remember when I did. So instead of it being planning, it was about kind of just jotting. It was almost like because I like to call the Musings Journal a creative logbook. So it was almost like a little logbook that I was keeping.
Mhm.
And I did that for a bunch of years in planners that I would buy, and I would look for, the perfect planner. But really, they started feeling restrictive to me because honestly, I am kind of a weekend warrior, and the weekend days on planners were always tinier, and they had lines and the backgrounds I didn't like. So in I think so 2010, I have them actually. I did put them out, even though I know we can't see them on the video. But in 2010, I started making my own from like a blank journal. So here's
Yeah.
like one of the covers. And
Okay.
I was, I started just drawing these boxes so each day could be the same size. And I would hand letter the days and the dates. So I did that for 4 years. And in the fourth year, I was like, okay, I'm spending more time making this journal than I am putting energy into like actually sort of logging things. And and I have a background in graphic design and graphic production and printing. And
Mhm.
so I thought, oh, I can make one of these and get it printed. And it was around the time when digital printing was first coming to be and you could do print on demand. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try and create a layout and just get it printed for myself. But then as I did that, I thought, well, maybe other people might like this journal. And so I'm going to make it available to other people and just kind of see what happens. And then I had to come up with a name, because as you can see, like from this one, 2010, I mean, all I was doing was putting the names on it. So
Yeah.
I liked the word Musings, and it just felt very like what I was doing. And so I called it the Daily Musings Journal, and that's kind of how it was born in
Wow.
2014.
Very cool. And I love the word musings too. It seems to relieve some pressure that it has to be really any one type of thing, or at a certain level of of art or creativity. Like it can really just be sort of free thought. And I love that. And I actually, this is so interesting. It sounds like this was sort of born as it was your personal practice of what you were already doing. And then it sounds like when you went to expand it and offer it to other people, it was sort of this energy of an experiment, like just to create and then see what happens. And I really resonate with that philosophy for a lot of how we can bring creativity and play and create life for ourselves. You sort of just have to start with what's working for you and then be willing to expand a little bit and see what happens.
I
Yeah.
like that. I hadn't thought of it in that perspective, but I do really like that.
Mm.
And what that brings me to, because it's sort of interesting. I mean, literally, when I was creating them, I would write in pencil kind of what I did in the day, and
Mm.
that was it. And over the years since I've created this, it's like I'll show people one of the blank pages. So here's this week's spread, which actually I have some stuff in pencil now, which I do sometimes, but these are the blank squares that people can create in, and they can add color. And so for me, my creative practice and what I do in this has changed so dramatically from
Mm.
when I had this personal practice and I was just kind of jotting down what I did in the day. So now mine's become, I mean, as you know, you've seen some of it, but it's become much
Yeah, it's
more visual.
yeah, it's like every page, just flipping through yours, it was such like a unique like record of not just like it was like your daily adventures, but sometimes it just came as like a symbol,
Mm-hmm.
or something you
Or a
added in.
saying, or
Yeah, a little saying, and you knew what it meant and you knew the significance of it. And then I love that it seems to also to be a documentary of like what art medium is interesting to you at that time.
yeah, because, and really, so each year it kind of ebbs and flows and changes. But yeah, like this year I've started, I mean, and this is not watercolor paper, but I've started using watercolor quite a bit in it. And I don't know if people can see on the screen, but it's very ripply now, which doesn't bother me. I mean, it's just great, but
Mermaidy.
there you go. I love that. It's like water. Yeah. I just love using these little watercolors and doing sketches. And so I've allowed myself to, play with doing a little drawing and painting that I've never, it's helped my drawing skills, and it's helped my creative, just, you know, because I love creating art and stuff like that. And this is just, it's a place where I can experiment and allow myself to draw and not really worry about what it looks like, or,
Yeah.
because it's really just for me, and it's for me to kind of document and play. So
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Gives you I love that you created space. That's another big sort of like personal mantra also comes out in my work, like creating space to play and creating space for what you want. And um, I'm curious because I know you mentioned, before you do some graphic design and virtual assistants, and then you also are the mountain mermaid with your adventure musings journal. Um, yeah, but I see so much art behind you. So Do you do your painting and art professionally as well, or is that also like play? I should say, is it just for you, or do you do it professionally as well? Mm-hmm.
My art, the painting that I have actually just been doing some training with, the intuitive painting process,
Mm-hmm.
because really, and especially from this journal and art, I do, quite a bit of just art journaling as well. I, I really came to realize that for me, it is about the process and it's not necessarily about creating a piece that I can sell. What
Mm-hmm.
I generally make is something that other people can use, or, um, if I'm creating, and I'm a big, I've been a lettering artist and a book artist and book binder. And so I generally make all my own journals, and I love to do lettering. So I do some lettering stuff for people, or illustration and logo work, but a lot of it is about the process of it for me, and just enjoying that time of playing in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
And newly, I am working to kind of bring that creative process, creative play offerings to others, to make space, to create space, to share that process with others, and allow them to come and play with paint and paper and that sort of thing. Because some people really like that, but I think they're, intimidated by thinking about, um, oh, I have to make it be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And this intuitive painting is really about pretending that you're a kid of your daughter's age, just, like 5 or 6, and just someone hands you crayons or someone hands you paints and a big piece of paper, and you just kind of do whatever you feel like you used to do when you were a kid. And it's okay to be an adult and do that. And it's really just for the experience of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I often find that it's fun to then enjoy those pieces for a little while, um, for as long as you want. But often they're ephemeral pieces that will get tucked away somewhere, kind of like your kids. Kids art often gets tucked away, and then you look at it some years later and you remember like that experience more than you remember the piece or something,
Yeah,
if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
totally. Yes, I love this. And actually, of course, like I really resonate with the vision of like really embracing the process of creating and playing and dreaming and um, being inspired. That's sort of what is my intention around like when I use the word journey of life, and instead of it being paint and watercolor and pencil mediums, really seeing it as this creative process of like sculpting life, and really looking at the process and the journey with that type of perspective, where I just show up and have this space where I can move from my head and the overthinking and trying to make something of value and do it right, and sort of what you were talking about like the pressure of making a piece of art for something, and really just move from that head space down into your heart and that intuition, and just play and create. And I think what I've found is what comes of that, like you had mentioned with your art, is like the experience is far more valuable, um, than anything that maybe if I had tried to micromanage and control, it really would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think you can, I like the way you kind of can bring that broader perspective into it, because it doesn't have to be, I mean, painting and playing on paper isn't necessarily for everyone, but there's so many ways that people can bring creativity
Mm.
into their lives, and sculpt that journey by whatever they're curious about.
Mhm.
Um, I actually love how Elizabeth Gilbert uses that. She's like, it's not about exactly what you're creating or feeling like you have to have this particular path. It's about following your curiosity and then, experimenting on that journey and enjoying that experience,
Mm-hmm.
rather
Mm-hmm.
than feeling like I have to have this particular, product at the end or.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I love that word curiosity. I have to agree with like Liz Gilbert around that. And I think Albert Einstein had some things to say about curiosity, but just this idea of being open and curious, and we can sort of put dreams or goals, in that open palm, in that hand, like this is what I would want. But then be curious where that process leads you and what's going on, and be willing to let go and shift into something else, and maybe something better as it unfolds.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Mm. Yeah. So I have to say, we touched on this a little bit, a broader perspective. And I love that you started your journals out with pencil. Yep. And words. And it sounds like you sort of did them at the end of the day, like a log of like what had happened, or um, yeah, I guess maybe could you speak to maybe some ideas around, or some inspiration for people who don't yet see themselves as creative, and so they might look at a creative musings and be like, no, not for me, not for me, I'm not an artist. So maybe could you speak a little bit to the value for them?
Um, sure. Yeah. And, I have people say that. And the other thing I think that people are intimidated by is like, I'm never going to do this every day.
Mm,
And so for those people that are really intimidated by dates, I have an undated version, but I've come to find that I really like having the dates because it gives me this ebb and flow um, of my days. And I mean, as you can see, like I have not really finished up this week.
mhm,
I mean, we're on Wednesday and it's not complete. So I don't necessarily do it every day. I think what it allows me is to kind of consider my days and consider what's been important to me in my days, and
mm,
how I might reflect that in my journal. And I think for people, I mean, if for journaling, I think for people that don't think they're creative, I do think that you have to want to. I love the idea of a logbook because it's like a ship captain. It's an historic thing. They used to keep logs for particular reasons. And for me, it's just maybe why people would keep it. It's almost like a little scrapbook to me.
mm,
And I think there's so many different ways to approach it. I have, and so I do have a few conversations videos on my
mhm,
website for the journal. Three different ways that, three completely different ways that people use the journal. One of them is she uses it as her meditation, like
mhm,
logbook, and every day she just does a quick little sketch or writes down something that has come, kind of like your lessons from the mat. And for
mhm,
her, and then she can use it, go back, and she's an entrepreneur, and she's like a business coach. And so she
mhm,
uses her findings in her meditation as metaphors for life. And so she might not share every single one, but there's been a few that she's really found that, that they come out in other parts of her
mhm.
work.
Yeah.
And when I talk to her, she's like, and I just restrict myself. I've got a black pen and I've got the square, and I don't want to give myself, I don't make myself feel like I need to use color or anything. I'm just going to do that because I really want to record something from my daily meditation. So, there's that way. I have another friend who doesn't necessarily use that journal, but she writes a haiku every single day and takes a photograph. So, that's another thing that attracts people. So I
Mhm.
think there's different ways to approach it. And it really depends on what you're curious about and maybe what you're curious to try and log,
Mm-hmm.
as far
Mm-hmm.
as a journal. And I think it's beneficial for me. It's been really beneficial for my art because it's given me permission to do whatever I want in this little tiny journal while I'm trying to record my days. So that's how I found it really beneficial. And I absolutely love looking back through the days and going, oh, wow, yeah, look what I did on that day. And so for me, that's the fun part of it. And I think, um, yeah, I think people, if they're just starting out, if they have a day planner anyway, and they want to have a different approach, this is a way to do that. And, and they have to just feel like, yeah, I'm going to make this investment, but if I don't put something in every day, it's okay, because it's taken me a long time to, evolve to where I am, and it's always evolving. It's not the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know if that really answers your question.
It does. It does. And I love that you actually shared, that you personally don't feel the pressure to do it every day. And I think that's sometimes a hesitation to starting a new practice. And really seeing like it doesn't have to be a practice. It can be a space to play and just see what happens. And you have the space, and if you don't use it or nothing comes to you, like it's really going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. And then I love also these other videos and ways that you see people being able to use this. I really look at the genius for me behind your musings journal is sort of the open framework of it all. And this
I
is,
feel like they're little blank canvases every
yeah,
day.
I feel like the word that I use a lot in my work is creating the container. And I feel like that's what you've done here is created a container to hold whatever version of somebody's creativity it is. So
Mhm.
the way that I've been playing around with it, which has worked for me, is almost the opposite. So you use it maybe to record things that are meaningful to you from your day and to reflect and have that log. Mine is like the opposite, maybe similar to this woman that you mentioned, but it's at the beginning of my day, and it actually just lives in my windowsill. And I keep it open, so it's really easy to use. And I have to say, I keep it simple too. Pencil is for me. I don't know if you can even see the writing, but
Yeah, but
um, yeah, just really, really simple. And what I normally end up doing is I'll sit in meditation, and that's really for me about creating space and being still. And then after, these phrases that I mentioned earlier that come to mind, sometimes I'll write one of those down. Sometimes it'll be about setting an intention for my day. Like, where do I really want to send my attention and focus and energy today? And and then I also just pose the question almost like to my intuition, like anything else that I should know for today, and sort of just draw, sketch, write what happens. And sometimes there will be a little bit of sketching that goes on, nothing crazy. I like to think of my creativity as coming out in other ways, like my process with clients and music. But giving myself, like you said, that permission to just play and let it flow. Um, and it's almost become a practice of non-judgment, which I can also see having a broader value and application, almost building that non-judgment, that non-self-critical muscle. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And I yeah, I love how you use, thank you for describing how you're using the journal,
Yeah.
because I think it's really I think it's awesome because you're gonna, I mean, I use it as a reflection for my art, which I've been working to develop, and not necessarily to become a fine artist, but because I just love playing with color and paint, and I also like to inspire others, creativity without feeling like there should be any, that there is any judgment around it. And I think the thoughts that you come up with probably also help you with your work as a coach, and helping people on their journey, because I can just, I can feel that, and I can feel that in the way you reflect back to me, what you see and what I'm
Mm.
doing, which again, I really appreciate,
Yeah.
Lindsay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for creating this amazing container too. Seriously. So, creativity, we've said that word probably a million times today. I don't know, a lot
Yeah.
in this conversation. And it's sort of like a hot button word or popular word these days.
Hmm.
I'd really love, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but I'd really love to hear like what your take of what creativity is in maybe even a broader sense, and then what you really see is the value of creativity, maybe for your own life, but also just what you see the value in community and a broader view, broader perspective.
Hmm. Um, sure. Let's see what I can come up with for that. I mean, I really feel like it's like you look up creativity and it's sort of creating something from nothing. And,
Mm,
people think of creative people as like, yeah, musicians or artists or, you know, um, stuff like that. But I feel like creativity is every day. It's again, it's about what you're teaching as far as how are you looking at your journey and what is it that you're wanting to do on this journey of life and what are you curious about. So I mean it can be everything from like what what clothes you wear to what you're cooking for dinner and how you find your where you got your food. Like for me it's like, oh, look at my pretty parsley and how can I use that today, or even just looking at that and really enjoying it because I watched it from sprout from the seeds
mm,
up to this kind of wild patch in the summer, um, that's now probably frozen in my garden.
right.
but but it's it's interesting because I do try and think about that, and I think about how like um, nature influences my creativity, and I feel like creativity is about even just you know getting outside and walking around and noticing and being present with everything that's around you, because there's so many tiny little details of other beings, or the river down here in town where we live in Salida, and how that flows and how it might look different every day, and just uh, noticing all that and what nature creates. I mean, to me,
Mm,
that's all part of creativity.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I
Um,
love that. I love the idea. I hadn't, I don't always make this connection between creativity and being present. Creativity has like an energy of like fluidity and water to me and curiosity, and present sometimes has this really like still sort of energy. So I actually love that you brought the two together and really saw nature as being, I mean, inherently your inspiration for creativity. But then the value of creativity is this being willing to engage with what's going on in the present moment and find that flexibility and find that, joy is really like the word that comes to mind
mhm,
uh, in noticing. And I can see, I mean, no matter what else is going on in life, um, there's just such a beauty to connecting into that deeper well-being, whether it's the way that the sun is playing through the leaves, or um, the cool magical color that you just created on your canvas that day, or um, watching your child laugh, whatever it is. Like, yeah, it kind of takes you out of that headspace of worry and anxiety, and puts you into that deeper joy underneath.
mhm. Yeah. And I do really think that's really what creativity is like. Yeah, because
Mhm.
it's, yeah, I love that example of watching your child laugh. I mean, you created that sort of container to allow her to have that space to laugh. I mean, sure, sometimes she's probably having a tantrum, but I mean, there's there's something about that, just like you said, allowing the joy and kind of stepping back and observing, what's happening in the moment, and realize it is that moment, and somehow it was created, and that's kind of the
Mhm.
ultimate creativity. I know that's probably a little deep, but
I'm okay with deep. It's all right.
yeah, but I just think it's like, some of the books I make, they're just like folded pieces of paper, and it's so fun. Or just even, making dinner, even if it isn't that, you know, it's just something simple. You're making, this meal and putting it out on the table, and um, and then enjoying your meal, either, hopefully with your family, or, sometimes I'm by myself, but just trying to really enjoy the fact that, hey, I created this, this meal for myself, and I'm enjoying it, and it's nourishing my body to, help me stay alive and be well. So I don't know. I don't think I used to have such a broad perspective on creativity, but I do feel like that's really important, especially with all the craziness that goes on in the world, and we can't control all of that. And so, um, trying to make space for that creativity and that curiosity as to how you can, find joy in whatever you're creating your moments. I mean,
Mhm,
they're the
mhm.
moments of your life, and you have a choice of, if you want to create to be, create a joyful moment, or create a, just not have that outlook.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's like the very spirit of resilience, I find. And, you know, I notice there's sometimes a really distinct narrow view of what joy or resilience or creativity is. And, this idea of creating moments. I love that. And I miss like connecting in with what's really, really important is what it
Mhm.
reminds me of. And um, it's sort of along the lines with how I think the worldview maybe we share a little bit of like seeing life as an adventure.
Mhm.
Um, there maybe it tends to be like a little bit of like optimism around like, oh, it's an adventure. But I really love actually, the definition of adventure more like a quest. Or a quest is inherently like there's a purpose behind it for you. Or a journey of uncovering and discovering. And it's that idea that there's some dark pieces sometimes to
Mhm.
quests and journeys, and there's some rough days, and sometimes you're sort of the teacher of the moment is like really heavy suffering and being uncomfortable, um and yet that too, that's part of the art that is our life.
Right. And
And
I
that's
think adventures really have that, the word
mm,
adventure has that in there. I mean, inherently, it's like when you go on an adventure or a journey, you may have, an idea in mind of where you're going to go, but an adventure inherently means that you're probably not going to get there in that same way that you might envision. And some of it might be easy, and some of it might and fun, and some of it might be, really kind of difficult and
mm.
dark, like you said.
Yeah, and that's like the present. That's like what you were saying about being present with what's really going on in front of you. And even those heavier moments, creating your own pieces of joy, or creating your own meaning, or um, creating the beauty from those moments. And not that we always do that or are able to do that, but that's sort of the intention behind it.
Right. And I can bring that back to even this, my journal, in that, I'm not, I'm creating a memory, like, I'm creating something that I want to remember,
Mm.
but when I'm actually creating it, like I struggled with that, because I'm like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because I'm not like in the present moment. But when I'm creating it, and that's what's really helped me with kind of my art practice. It's like, oh, I want to remember this about this day, and I'm gonna, create this little drawing, or maybe today I'm just gonna do that with letters, or today I'm just gonna, write down what I do in the day. And but I like to try, and even if I'm doing it at a later time, I like to be present with what I'm creating on that page, because I'm creating this cool book that is a beautiful memory for me to look back on, and I really enjoy that. So um,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know if that helps kind of bring that back full circle, because I do
Mhm.
sometimes struggle with like, it's present moment, but I'm going back in time, like when I'm creating my stuff. So um, yeah, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's still really important, because when I'm actually doing it, I've brought myself into that present moment.
Yeah, but it sounds like then able to like intentionally choose the memory and like the narrative around it, which is a big thing, like about living into this archetype and writing your own story
Hmm.
and, being on this adventure and this quest. Sounds like being present, but even doing it later allows you to really reflect, like, what do I want to say about this?
Right.
um, and what is meaningful to me from this, and what am I taking away, and really distilling it down. Yeah, and that's really, I love the idea of having a record. I can see that being sort of, my mind is whirling, that being some of what I could see inviting my clients in this journal. Um, but this idea of having this record of their journey,
Right.
throughout.
And that made me think, like, sometimes, like, literally what I want to remember is that, like, on this one, I don't know if you can read it, but that word meltdown, like my personal meltdown, like that was a day I just, that was part of the day. And it's something that I want to remember, that, oh yeah, that happens to me. And, but, and I haven't always been as good at kind of observing that and then moving through it. But I mean, this journal, I didn't do that in the moment, but afterwards I'm like, yeah, I need to remember that I did that. And then I, moved through it, and I wrote some notes so I could remember exactly, kind of what happened and why. And then that helps me
Mhm.
on my journey.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I really love that. I mean, it sounds like, again, it's just this amazing container for you to infuse your own practice into it. Whether it's like, a daily log at the end of the day, like, what were my adventures today? What kind of went down?
mhm.
Or, this, using it after meditation or as an intention setting practice. Or as I love this too, like this record throughout, to where maybe every day is not filled out, and that sort of speaks to your journey too. um,
Absolutely. I
but by
do.
the end of the year, like, you have this amazing record, because, as our brains are not the greatest record keepers. So if we get to the end of the year and you think, man, this year was like terrible, or I really didn't show up, or whatever we're feeling in that moment, we now have this really beautiful record of the highs and the lows, and what really, like, you were taking away intentionally to put down in your little square. And I think that allows us to zoom out a little bit and not get lost in the drama of right then,
Hmm.
really zoom out and look at the bigger piece of this journey of life, and this, what we're creating every day, and what we're really about and our
Hmm.
purpose.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Yes. Thank you so much for being willing to sit down and chat a little bit about your creative process and this journal. I really appreciate your willingness.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I mean, it's such a gift. Like, we're sitting down with the artist and the creative here. So, thank you. And I know people, watching this video later, they can go to your website, check out maybe some of the other videos. And
Mhm.
then I know we'll have some links to see how they can order a journal for themselves and really see what else you're up to, because you have a few other things up your sleeve. So again, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah. We'll be in
Okay.
touch. All right.
All right.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye-bye.